Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The elevator stopped between floors. Again. I pressed the button 3 more times, watching the red digital display flicker between 8 and 9. The Twin Towers Memorial Hotel wasn't supposed to have these kinds of problems. Not for what I was paying per night in downtown Manhattan. But here's what I didn't know yet. Some elevators don't just get stuck. Some elevators remember. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm a travel blogger. I've stayed in over 200 hotels across America, from the Stanley in Colorado to the Queen Mary in California. I thought I'd seen it all. I thought I understood what makes a place feel wrong. I was about to learn how wrong I could be. The story begins now. The lobby of the Twin Towers Memorial Hotel gleamed under crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's cars. Everything was polished marble and gold accents, the kind of place where Wall Street executives brought their clients to impress them. The concierge wore a perfectly pressed uniform, his smile practiced but genuine. "Welcome to the memorial, Ms. Chen." He handed me a key card with the hotel's distinctive twin spire logo. "You're in room 911 on the 9th floor. One of our premium suites. Room 911. The number felt strange on my tongue when I repeated it back to him. "Is there anything special about that room?" I asked, pulling out my phone to start recording. My followers loved behind-the-scenes content from fancy hotels. The concierge's smile never wavered, but something shifted in his eyes. "It's one of our most requested rooms, actually. Guests find it memorable." That should have been my first clue. As I waited for the elevator, I noticed something odd about the other guests in the lobby. They moved differently than people usually do in hotels. Instead of the typical hurried pace of business travelers or the leisurely stroll of tourists, everyone seemed to move with purpose, but also with a strange kind of reverence, like they were in a church rather than a hotel. A woman in a navy business suit caught my eye. She was standing perfectly still near the concierge desk, staring up at something on the wall. When I followed her gaze, I saw it was a memorial plaque I hadn't noticed before. Names, hundreds of names etched in black granite. The woman turned and looked directly at me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she was smiling. "First time?" she asked, the same question I would later hear in my dreams. "Yes," I replied, confused. "It changes you," she said simply, then walked toward the elevators. I watched her press the button for the 9th floor. The elevator ride up was smooth and silent, too silent. Most hotel elevators play soft jazz or have that gentle humming of machinery. This one was dead quiet, like being inside a vacuum. I watched the numbers climb, 3, 4, 5. At the 7th floor, the elevator lurched, just once. A tiny drop that made my stomach flutter. "Weird," I muttered, steadying myself against the brass handrail. But as I gripped the rail, I felt something carved into the metal. Letters. When I looked down, I could barely make out words etched into the brass. "We remember." 8, 9. The doors opened with a soft chime. The 9th floor hallway stretched in both directions, carpeted in deep burgundy with gold thread patterns. The walls were lined with black and white photographs of New York City through the decades. I walked slowly toward room 911, taking in the images. Construction workers on steel beams, crowds in Times Square, the skyline changing year by year. But as I got closer to my room, the photographs changed. They became more specific. Construction workers, but now they were building something that looked familiar. Very familiar. I stopped in front of one photograph. 2 identical towers reaching towards the sky, still under construction. The date in the corner read 1970. Then I noticed something else. In several of the photos, there were people in the background who seemed to be looking directly at the camera, not posing for the shot, but looking at me. Through time, through the glass frame. My keycard trembled slightly as I held it up to the sensor. Room 911 was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city, and the bed was king-sized with Egyptian cotton sheets that probably cost more than my rent. Everything was perfect, except for the sound. It was barely audible at first, a soft whooshing, like wind through an open window. But all the windows were sealed, climate-controlled. There shouldn't be any wind. I unpacked my camera equipment and started setting up for the room tour video I always filmed. My tripod legs clicked against the hardwood floor as I adjusted the height. The camera's LCD screen showed the room in perfect detail, but when I reviewed the footage later, I noticed something odd. In the corner of every shot, just at the edge of the frame, there was a shadow that didn't belong to any furniture in the room, and as I watched, the shadow seemed to be moving. Falling. That first night, I slept better than I had in months. The bed was like sleeping on a cloud, and the blackout curtains blocked every trace of city light. I should have felt completely rested. Instead, I woke up with the strangest sensation. Like I'd been falling in my dreams. Not the typical falling dream where you jolt awake when you hit the ground. This was different. In my dream, I'd been falling for what felt like hours. Slowly, gently, like floating through warm water. The weird part? I wasn't scared. It felt peaceful. But when I fully woke up, I found something that made my blood run cold. There were messages on my phone, text messages from numbers I didn't recognize, all sent during the night while I was sleeping. The first one, sent at 8:46 a.m., the plane hit the North Tower. At 9:03 a.m., South Tower hit, we're trapped. 9:37 a.m., Pentagon hit too. What's happening? 9:59 a.m., South Tower is falling. Oh God, it's falling. 10:28 a.m., North Tower down. We're gone. My hands shook as I read them. These weren't random spam messages, they were timestamps. The exact timeline of September 11th, 2001. But the messages kept coming, even as I watched. 10:45 a.m. Sarah, can you hear us? My breath caught in my throat. How did they know my name? 10:46 a.m. We've been waiting for you. 10:47 a.m. Room 911 is special. It's where the timelines meet. I screenshotted every message, but when I looked at the screenshots later, they showed nothing but blank text bubbles. I shook it off and got ready for my day of exploring the city. The shower was amazing, all marble and rainfall showerhead, but as I was drying off, I noticed something in the mirror. For just a moment, my reflection looked like it was tilted, like the entire bathroom had shifted slightly to one side. I blinked, and everything was normal again. But as I stared at my reflection, I noticed something else. There were handprints on the mirror behind me. Small handprints like someone had pressed their palms against the glass from the other side. As I watched, more appeared, dozens of them covering the entire surface. I spun around, but there was nothing behind me except the bathroom wall. When I turned back to the mirror, the handprints were gone. Too much caffeine, I told myself, though I hadn't had any coffee yet. The elevator ride down was perfectly normal. No lurching, no weird silences, just smooth, professional service. The doorman wished me a pleasant day, and I spent the morning walking through Central Park, filming content for my channel. But throughout the day, I kept getting this sensation. Like the ground beneath my feet wasn't quite solid, like everything was tilted just a few degrees off from where it should be. I also couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Not by anyone threatening, but by presences. Shadows that moved just outside my peripheral vision. When I turned to look, there would be nothing there except ordinary people going about their ordinary lives. But sometimes, just sometimes, I'd catch one of those ordinary people looking at me with recognition, like they knew me, like they'd been expecting me. By evening, I was exhausted. The city noise, the crowds, the constant stimulation. All I wanted was to get back to that incredibly comfortable bed and sleep for 12 hours straight. But first, I decided to do some research in the hotel's business center. I wanted to understand more about this building, about room 911, about why I was having such strange experiences. The business center was on the 3rd floor, a quiet room lined with computers and printers. I was the only guest there, which was perfect for concentrated research. I started with basic searches about the hotel, but quickly found myself diving deeper. Construction records, architectural plans, newspaper articles from 2003 when the building opened. That's when I found the articles about the incidents. Apparently, room 911 had a history. Not a dangerous history, no deaths, no violence, but guests consistently reported unusual experiences. Falling dreams, strange sounds, messages from unknown numbers, visions of people who weren't there. The hotel management had initially considered sealing the room permanently, but something interesting happened when they tried. Other rooms started experiencing the same phenomena, as if whatever was in 911 was spreading, looking for a place to manifest. So they reopened 911 and found that the experiences contained themselves to that single room. Guests who specifically requested it were warned in advance. Most were researchers, paranormal investigators, or people who had personal connections to September 11th. But some were just ordinary travelers who, for whatever reason, felt called to stay there. The elevator ride up was quiet again. I found myself counting the floors. 1, 2, 3. At the 7th floor, it happened again. That tiny lurch, that split second of weightlessness. But this time I was ready for it. I looked up at the digital display and saw something that made my blood run cold. For just a moment, the display showed floor 110. Floor 110. But this hotel only had 15 floors. I blinked and it showed 7 again, then 8, then 9. When the doors opened on 9, I didn't immediately step out. Instead, I pressed the button for the 15th floor, the top floor of the hotel. The elevator continued up. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. The doors opened to reveal a maintenance area. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, the mechanical systems that kept the hotel running. Nothing unusual. But as the doors started to close, I jammed my foot between them and looked more carefully. There, in the far corner of the mechanical room, was another elevator. An elevator that shouldn't exist. The doors were old-fashioned brass, polished to a mere shine. Above them was a display showing numbers that went far higher than 15. As I watched, the brass doors opened with a soft chime. Inside, I could see people. Dozens of people in business attire, standing calmly as if waiting for their floor. They all turned to look at me, and I saw that same peaceful expression I would later recognize in my dreams. One man in a security uniform stepped forward. "Going up?" he asked with a gentle smile. I stumbled backward, letting my elevator doors close. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. When I got back to room 911, I immediately started packing. I had seen enough. I didn't care about losing the money I'd paid for 3 nights. I just wanted out. But as I folded my clothes and gathered my camera equipment, I found more photographs scattered on the bed. Not the same ones from the night before. These were different. These showed me, standing in various locations around the hotel. Me in the lobby, looking at the memorial plaque. Me in the business center, researching on the computer. Me in the 15th floor elevator, staring in shock at something outside the frame. And in the last photograph, I was in room 911, packing my suitcase, just as I was doing at that very moment. But in the photo, I wasn't alone. The room was filled with people. They were standing around me, watching me pack, all of them with that same peaceful expression. And at the bottom of the photograph, someone had written in careful handwriting, "Please don't go. We've been waiting so long for someone to listen." The second night, I wasn't alone in my dreams. I was falling again, that same gentle, endless descent. But this time, I could see others falling beside me. Dozens of them, hundreds. All of us floating downward through what looked like an enormous vertical tunnel lined with office windows. Some were in business suits, others in casual clothes. A few wore hard hats and work boots, but they all had the same expression on their faces. Not fear, but something else, something that looked almost like relief. One man fell past me, close enough that I could see his name tag, Mike, Security. He looked right at me and smiled, a sad but peaceful smile. "First time?" he asked, his voice somehow clear despite the rushing air. I tried to answer, but no sound came out. "It gets easier," he said, already drifting away from me. The falling part, anyway. A woman in a flight attendant's uniform floated beside me for a moment. "We're not from the towers," she said gently. "Some of us are from the planes. Some from the Pentagon. But we all ended up in the same place." "Where?" I managed to whisper. "Between," said a man in a firefighter's uniform who was falling upward somehow past us in the opposite direction. Between what was and what could have been. Between the moment of impact and the moment of peace. "But why here?" I asked. "Why this hotel?" Mike appeared beside me again. "Because someone needed to build a place where people could remember us as we really were. Not just as victims or heroes or statistics. As people, as human beings who loved and laughed and worried about ordinary things right up until the end." "The architect," I said, understanding suddenly. "Dr. Rodriguez. She designed this place as more than just a memorial. She designed it as a bridge," said the flight attendant. "A place where the living and the between could meet." "We don't haunt this place," Mike continued. "We inhabit it. There's a difference. Haunting is about pain and unfinished business. This is about love and connection and making sure the world remembers not just what happened to us, but who we were." As we fell, I began to understand something profound. These weren't ghosts in the traditional sense. They were memories made manifest, love given form, the collective refusal of thousands of people to let their stories end with tragedy. "So when guests stay in room 911, I began. "They become witnesses," said the firefighter. "They carry our stories back into the world. Not scary ghost stories, but human stories. Stories of ordinary people who faced extraordinary circumstances and chose love over fear. Even at the end?" I asked. "Especially at the end," said Mike. "Do you know what the last messages were? The ones people sent from the towers and the planes? They weren't about anger or revenge, they were, 'I love you,' over and over again. 'Tell my wife I love her. I love you, Mom. Take care of the kids.' Love was the last thing on our minds, and it's the first thing we want people to remember." I woke up gasping, my heart pounding. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:33 a.m. The room was different. Not dramatically different, just wrong. The furniture was all in the same places, but everything felt shifted somehow. Like the entire room had rotated just a few degrees while I was sleeping. And that whooshing sound was louder now. I got up and walked to the window. The city sprawled out below me, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. But when I looked down, way down, the street seemed impossibly far away. Too far away. I was only on the 9th floor. The street should have been maybe 90 feet below me. But looking down now, it felt like I was 1,000 feet up. Like I was looking down from I stepped back from the window, my hands shaking. That's when I saw the photographs. They were scattered on the floor beside my bed. Photographs that hadn't been there when I went to sleep. Black and white images of people in an office setting. People at desks, in meetings, standing around water coolers. Normal office photos. Except everyone in them was looking directly at the camera, directly at me. And in every single photograph, someone was falling past the window in the background. But now I also found something else. A handwritten letter on hotel stationery, written in elegant cursive. Dear Sarah, we know you're frightened, and we understand. What you're experiencing goes against everything you thought you knew about reality, but we want you to understand that you're not in danger. You're in sanctuary. Room 911 exists in a fold of time, a place where September 11th, 2001 at 9:11 a.m. continues forever. Not the terror or the pain, but the love. The phone calls saying goodbye. The strangers helping strangers. The first responders running toward danger instead of away from it. You see, when something that powerful happens, when that much love and courage and human connection gets concentrated in a single moment, it creates ripples in reality. Room 911 is one of those ripples. We stay here not because we're trapped, but because we choose to. We stay because someone needs to remember. Someone needs to witness. Someone needs to carry the truth back to the world. That even in humanity's darkest moment, love prevailed. Every guest who stays in this room becomes part of that truth. They carry a piece of us with them when they leave. Not as a burden, but as a gift. You don't have to stay if you're not ready. But if you do, if you let yourself truly fall with us, you'll understand something beautiful about what it means to be human. We are not the falling. We are the choosing to love even while falling. With deep respect and gratitude, the witnesses of Room 911 PS. Check your camera footage from today. Really look at it. You'll see that you've been documenting more than just a hotel room. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in the hotel's business center, researching everything I could find about the building. The Twin Towers Memorial Hotel had been built in 2003, 2 years after. The original plans called for it to be exactly 110 stories tall, a memorial and tribute. But those plans had been changed, 15 floors instead. Reasonable. Respectful. Except, what if the original plans hadn't been completely abandoned? What if somehow those 110 floors still existed? Just not in the way we normally think of floors existing. I found the building's original architect in an old newspaper interview. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now in her 70s, living in a retirement community in Queens. I called her that morning. Room 911? Her voice was sharp, alert. You're staying in room 911? Yes, there's something strange about it. The elevator, the dreams, the falling sensation. There was a long pause. How many people have you seen? The question caught me off guard. Seen where? Falling, in your dreams. How many people have you seen falling? I thought about it. In that second dream, there had been so many. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Another pause. They're not dreams, dear. My phone felt slippery in my hands. What do you mean? When we designed the Memorial Hotel, we wanted to honor everyone who didn't make it out that day. But how do you honor people who fell? How do you create a memorial for falling? I don't understand. Room 911 isn't just a room number, it's coordinates. September 11th, 9:11 a.m. The exact moment when time folded. When the building collapsed, it didn't just fall down. It fell through itself, creating a pocket, a space between spaces where the falling never ends. My mouth was dry. That's impossible, is it? You've been there. You felt it. Every guest in that room experiences the same thing. They fall with them. The ones who didn't have a choice. But why? Why would you design something like that? Her voice was barely a whisper. Because someone needs to remember what it felt like. Someone needs to witness their final moments, to honor their experience, the falling. It's not scary once you understand it. It's peaceful. It's their way of saying goodbye. Dr. Rodriguez, I said carefully, are you telling me that you intentionally designed a room that connects to the moment of the attacks? Not the attacks themselves, she said firmly. To the love. The overwhelming love that people felt in those final moments. The phone calls to family. The messages of love. The strangers helping strangers. That's what Room 911 preserves. Not the hatred that caused the tragedy, but the love that transcended it. How is that even possible? Architecture isn't just about space, dear. It's about intention. When you design a building with enough love and purpose, when you pour your heart into creating a space for remembrance and healing, sometimes the universe responds. Sometimes space itself remembers. Have you ever stayed in the room? Once, the night before we opened the hotel, I needed to make sure it was right, that it honored them the way they deserved to be honored. What did you experience? I fell with my daughter, she said, her voice breaking slightly. My daughter, who worked on the 97th floor of the North Tower. She called me that morning at 9:15. Said she loved me, and not to worry, that everything would be okay. Those were the last words I ever heard from her. Oh my God. But in room 911, I got to fall with her. I got to hold her hand as we drifted down together through that space between moments. And she told me she was proud of what I was building. She told me it would help people understand that even in our final moments, we choose love. I hung up the phone and just sat there in the business center surrounded by the soft clicking of keyboards and the hum of printers. But now I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Other guests in the business center were researching the same things I was. September 11th, the hotel's history, room 911. A woman at the computer next to mine looked over at me. She was the same woman I'd seen in the lobby on my first day, the one who'd been staring at the memorial plaque. Third night? She asked. Second, I replied. It gets more intense on the third night. That's when you really understand. How many times have you stayed here? This is my 15th visit. I come every year on the anniversary. My husband was on flight 93. He called me from the plane to say goodbye. I'm so sorry. Don't be. This place. It lets me say goodbye back. It lets me tell him I love him too every year. It lets me fall with him for a moment and feel that peace he felt when he knew he was helping save other lives. She turned back to her computer, and I saw what she was researching. Not articles about the hotel or the attacks. She was looking at photos of her husband, reading the transcripts of phone calls from that day, surrounding herself with memories of love. That night, I didn't fight it. When the elevator lurched at the 7th floor, I didn't grab the handrail. When the display flickered to 110, I just watched. When I got back to room 911 and felt that tilting sensation, I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. And when the falling started, I let myself fall. This time, I wasn't afraid. This time, I understood. I was falling with them. All of them. Office workers and security guards, maintenance staff and executives, visitors and employees, flight attendants and passengers and people who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. All of us falling together through that endless space between what was and what could have been. And as I fell, I understood something else. They weren't trapped there. They were choosing to stay. Choosing to fall again and again, not out of pain or fear, but out of love. Love for each other. Love for the people they'd left behind. Love for a world that would remember them not just as victims, but as human beings who face the unthinkable with grace. Mike, the security guard, fell past me again. "You get it now," he said, smiling. "I think so," I managed to say. "Will you tell them? The ones up there? Will you tell them we're okay?" I nodded, tears streaming up my face as I fell. "We're okay," he repeated. "We're all okay." Part 6. The Witness. I checked out the next morning, but not before I understood my role in all of this. The concierge asked if I'd enjoyed my stay. It was memorable, I told him, using his own word. He nodded knowingly. "Most guests find it is. Will you be writing about your experience?" "Yes," I said, "but not the way people might expect." "Good," he said, handing me a small card. "If you ever want to come back, just call this number. There's no charge for return visits. We consider it a public service." As I wheeled my suitcase toward the exit, I turned back one last time to look at the hotel. 15 floors of gleaming glass and steel, reaching toward the sky. But for just a moment, I could see the others. 95 more floors, translucent and shimmering, stretching impossibly high. And in every window, someone was waving goodbye. I'm back home now, editing the footage from my trip. Most of it came out fine, but the videos from room 911, they're different. In every single frame, there are shadows that don't belong. Faces in the reflection of the window, figures moving in the background. And in the last video I shot just before checkout, there's something else. If you look very carefully at the window behind me, you can see them falling. Dozens of people falling past the window in slow motion, all of them peaceful, all of them smiling, all of them free. But there's something more in that footage, something I didn't notice until I was editing it. At the very end of the video, just before I turn off the camera, you can see me mouth something. I don't remember saying it, but it's clear on the footage. I'm saying, "I love you too." Because that's what you do when you're falling with people who chose love over fear in their final moments. You love them back. So that's my story about room 911 at the Twin Towers Memorial Hotel. I've shared the footage on my channel, though I warn you, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And if you're ever in New York, if you ever find yourself staying at the Memorial Hotel, and they offer you room 911, remember that you're not just a guest. You're a witness. You're there to listen to their stories, to carry their love back into the world, to remember them as they really were. Human beings who faced the impossible with grace and chose connection over isolation, love over hate, hope over despair. The falling isn't the scary part. The scary part would be forgetting. What do you think happened in that room? Have you ever experienced something similar in a hotel? And most importantly, would you have the courage to stay the night? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and trust me, after what I experienced, I'm very curious to hear your theories. But be careful what you wish for, because some rooms never let you truly check out. They just teach you what it really means to check into the human experience. And that's a lesson worth falling for. Story number 2. The cable guy only comes on Thursdays. That's what the landlord told me when I moved into the duplex on Maple Street in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Strange rule, I thought. But the rent was cheap, and after my divorce, I couldn't be picky. Besides, how often does cable really break? I found out soon enough. Listen, I need to tell you this story, not because I want to, but because if you're hearing this, you might be next. And when he knocks on your door, when you see that van pull up on a Thursday afternoon, you need to know what you're really letting into your home. Now, let me tell you exactly what happened. It started 3 weeks after I moved in. Tuesday night, around 11:30. I was watching the local news on Channel 7. You know, the usual stuff. Weather forecast, high school football scores, that new strip mall opening on First Avenue. Normal Cedar Rapids news. Then the screen flickered. Just once, like when a storm's coming through. But the sky was clear that night. I could see stars through my living room window. The news came back, but something was off. The anchor, Jennifer Hayes, I'd watched her for years, was wearing a different blazer, red instead of blue, and she was reporting on a fire at the old Quaker Oats plant. Thing is, that plant burned down in 2008. I remember because my buddy Tom worked security there. Lost his job when it happened. But Jennifer was talking about it like it just happened. Today, Tuesday, October 15th, 2024. The date stamp on the screen confirmed it. I grabbed my phone, Googled it. Nothing, no fire. The plant had been demolished years ago. A Walmart stood there now. The screen flickered again. Jennifer was back in her blue blazer, talking about the strip mall, like nothing had happened. I chalked it up to exhaustion. Divorce does things to your mind, makes you see things that aren't there. At least, that's what I told myself as I headed to bed. But Wednesday night, it happened again. This time, I was watching a Packers game. Fourth quarter, Packers up by 3. Jordan Love throws a perfect spiral to the end zone and flicker. Same game, same quarter. But now the Packers were down by 14. Different players on the field, names I'd never heard of. The stadium looked wrong, too. Something about the lights, the color of the grass. I rubbed my eyes, blinked hard. Flicker. Back to normal. Packers up by 3. Jordan Love under center. My hands were shaking as I turned off the TV. The black screen reflected my face back at me, and for just a second, I swear I saw someone else looking back. The neighbor's warning. Thursday morning, before I called the cable company, I ran into Mrs. Chen from the other side of the duplex. She was checking her mail, and when she saw me, her face went pale. "You had troubles with your television?" Her accent was thick, but her eyes were sharp. Alert. "How did you—" "The walls are thin. I hear the sounds. The wrong sounds. Music that doesn't belong. Voices speaking words that haven't been said yet." She looked around nervously as if something might be listening. "You called them?" "Called who?" "The Thursday people. The ones who come to fix what shouldn't be broken." I was about to— "Don't let them stay too long," she interrupted. "And don't believe everything they tell you. The man who comes, he's been coming to this street for 40 years. Same face, same van, same stories." Her grip on my arm was surprisingly strong. "My husband, before he disappeared, he talked to the Thursday man, asked too many questions, wanted to know too much. Disappeared 3 years ago. Thursday night. I heard him talking to someone in the living room, but when I came out," she shook her head. "Empty room. Television still on. But the man on the screen, he looked like my husband, sounded like him, but his eyes—" She shuddered. "Wrong eyes. Old eyes in a young face. Mrs. Chen, don't trust the channels they show you," she whispered. "And whatever you do, don't reach through. Promise me." I promised, but I didn't understand, not yet. 20 minutes later, I called the cable company. "We'll send someone out," the woman said. Her voice sounded tired, or maybe scared. "He only comes on Thursdays. Today's Thursday." "Yes," a pause. "He'll be there between 2 and 4. Make sure you're home." "Don't I need to—" She'd already hung up. 2:15 p.m. I heard the van before I saw it. Not the engine. The music. Old stuff. Big band, maybe? It drifted through my closed windows like smoke, getting louder as the van approached. A white van, the kind without windows in the back, no company logo, just a small magnetic sign on the door, Thursday cable service. The music stopped when he parked. The man who stepped out looked normal. That's what made it worse, somehow. Jeans, work boots, navy polo shirt, tool belt around his waist. Maybe 50, 55. Gray hair, thick at the sides. The kind of guy you'd see at Home Depot on a Saturday, buying fertilizer for his lawn. But his eyes were older than his face. Much older. "Cable trouble?" he asked when I opened the door. His voice had that same big band quality. Smooth, but somehow distant, like it was coming from another room. "Yeah, it's been flickering, showing wrong things." He nodded like he'd heard this before. "May I come in?" Something in my gut said no. Every instinct screamed to slam the door, pack my stuff, leave town, but my mouth said, "Sure." He walked straight to the living room without asking where it was. Set his toolbox down, metal, scratched, with stickers from states that looked wrong somehow. The Illinois sticker had too many stars. The Iowa one was the wrong shade of blue. "Show me," he said. I turned on the TV. Local news. Everything normal. "It only happens at night," I explained. "Around 11:30, sometimes during games." He wasn't listening. He was staring at the screen, head tilted slightly. Then he reached out and touched it. Just pressed his palm flat against the glass. The screen went black, but not off. It was showing black, like staring into a cave, into depth that shouldn't exist in a flat screen. The first glimpse. "Your TV's been picking up signals from next door," he said, but his voice had changed. Deeper now, more resonant, like it was coming from inside the television itself. "Next door? You mean the other side of the duplex? But Mrs. Chen doesn't even have—" "Not that next door." He pulled his hand back. The news returned, but now Jennifer Hayes was reading different stories. Stories about people I'd never heard of, events that hadn't happened. The other next door. My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" He turned to look at me, and for a second, just a second, his face flickered, like the TV. Same features but arranged wrong. Too many teeth when he smiled, eyes that reflected light like an animal's. "Every channel is broadcasting," he said, opening his toolbox. "Channel 7 here shows news. Channel 7 there shows news. Same channel, different signal. Your TV's picking up both." Inside his toolbox I glimpsed things that made no sense. Cables that moved on their own, writhing like snakes. Circuit boards that pulsed with their own heartbeat. And underneath it all, a low humming sound that made my teeth ache. "Channel 7, where?" He pulled out something that looked like a remote, but it had too many buttons. Some of the symbols hurt to look at. Geometric shapes that seemed to fold in on themselves, numbers that changed when I wasn't looking directly at them. The place where the plant didn't burn, where the Packers lost, where Jennifer Hayes wore red. He pressed a button, and the TV hummed, a deep sound I felt in my chest, in my bones, behind my eyes. Most TVs, they're locked to one signal. Yours got loose, started sliding. Sliding where? He looked at me the way you'd look at a child asking why the sky is blue. Patient, but tired. But behind that patience, I saw something else. Hunger. You ever wonder why mirrors reverse left and right, but not up and down? What does that have to do with everything's paired? He continued, adjusting something on his device. The humming grew louder, and I could swear I heard voices buried in it. Distant conversations, laughter, screaming. This world, this channel, that channel. Most people, they live their whole lives seeing just one side. But sometimes, he gestured at my TV, sometimes the wall gets thin. Signals bleed through. The TV flickered and I saw my living room on the screen, but it wasn't my living room. Same furniture, same layout, but the photos on the wall showed different people, a family I'd never seen. And in the corner, sitting in my chair, was me. But that me was watching TV too, and on his screen I could see another living room, another version, and another me watching another TV, and another, stretching away into infinity like facing mirrors. "How many are there?" I whispered. "Channels?" The cable guy's smile stretched wider than a human smile should. "Infinite. Every choice you didn't make, every word you didn't say, every path you didn't take, they all exist somewhere, broadcasting on their own frequency. Is that, you're watching him, he's watching you," he interrupted. "And they're all watching each other. It's a feedback loop. Happens sometimes when the signals cross. Very dangerous." "Dangerous how?" He started packing up his tools, but his movements were too fluid, too precise, like he wasn't entirely solid. "You ever hear of someone who disappeared? Just vanished? No trace?" I nodded. "Sometimes they don't vanish. They just switch channels." My blood turned cold. "You mean they end up in the wrong broadcast?" "Yes. Living in a world that's almost theirs but not quite, where their spouse has a different middle name, where their kids were born on different days, where their job is 2 blocks east instead of west." He closed his toolbox, and for just a moment I saw his reflection in the metal. It wasn't his face, it was mine. Small differences at first, but they add up. "How do you know all this?" He smiled, that too many teeth smile again. "Because I fix TVs that show the wrong reality. Been doing it for a very long time." He was at the door when I asked, "Why only Thursdays?" He stopped, turned back slowly. "You really want to know?" "Number." The answer was no, but I said yes. He set his toolbox down again, sat on my couch like we were old friends about to have a beer. But his eyes, those ancient eyes, they made my skin crawl. "Thursday's the thin day," he said. "Has been since, since TV was invented. Maybe before. Radio had the same problem, but fewer people noticed. Harder to see the difference when it's just sound. I don't understand. Monday through Wednesday, the signals are strong, locked in place. Friday through Sunday, same thing. But Thursday," he pulled out a cigarette that looked hand-rolled, but the tobacco was the wrong color. Too dark, too oily. "Thursdays when the boundaries get soft, like, you know how dawn isn't quite night, but isn't quite day? Thursdays like that, but for realities. The history of Thursday. It wasn't always this way," he continued, not lighting the cigarette but just holding it. "Used to be the barriers were solid. No bleeding through, no signal crossover. But then they started broadcasting. Radio first, then television. All those electromagnetic waves bouncing around looking for receivers." His voice took on the cadence of someone telling an old story. "What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, is that reality has its own frequency, its own signal, and when you fill the air with enough artificial waves, enough competing broadcasts, sometimes they interfere with the natural order." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I could see my breath. "Thursday's the weakest day," he said. "Always has been. Something about the way time flows, the way space bends. The ancient peoples knew it, but they didn't have words for it. They just knew that Thursday was when things got strange." "What kind of things?" "Disappearances. People seeing things that weren't there, or were there just on a different channel." He finally lit the cigarette and the flame was blue. Too blue. When television came along, it made everything worse. Gave the wrongness a way to manifest, a window to look through. "That's insane." "Is it?" He gestured at my TV. You've seen it yourself. The other channels bleeding through. The other news, the other games, the other you. The other me. I shuddered, remembering that face on the screen. My face, but wrong. Like looking at a photograph of yourself taken in a dream. Most people, their TVs stay locked even on Thursdays, he continued. But sometimes something shakes them loose. Strong emotion, usually. Grief, rage, desperation. His eyes fixed on mine, and I felt like he was looking through me, seeing things I'd tried to hide. Going through a divorce, are we? I didn't answer. Didn't need to. That'll do it. All that pain, that anger. It sends out ripples, disrupts the frequency, and once your TV starts sliding. He shook his head. Well, that's why I exist. Who do you work for? The question hung in the air like smoke. For a long moment he just stared at me. Then he laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Work for? Oh, that's rich. He took a long drag from his blue-flamed cigarette. I don't work for anyone. I work because I have to, because stopping would be worse. I don't understand. No one. Everyone. Does it matter? He stood up, and for a moment, his shadow on the wall didn't match his movements. Your TV's fixed now, locked back to this reality. Should stay that way as long as you don't what? Don't wish too hard for things to be different. He must have seen something in my face, because he sighed. Look, I get it. Your wife left. You lost the house. You're starting over in this cheap duplex, wondering where it all went wrong. You lie awake at night thinking about the choices you made, the words you said or didn't say. You wonder, what if? Each word hit like a punch. But here's the thing, he continued. Every what if is real somewhere. There's a channel where you said the right thing, where you fought harder, where she stayed, and if you want it bad enough, if you wish hard enough on a Thursday night, your TV might find that channel. Would that be so bad? His laugh was bitter, cold. You think you'd be happier there? In the world where she stayed. Maybe in that world you're the one who left. Maybe in that world you have kids you don't have here. Or don't have kids you do have here. Maybe in that world your parents died young. Your brother was never born. Your best friend is your worst enemy. He picked up his toolbox and I noticed that it left no impression in the carpet, like it weighed nothing at all. Every channel is different, and once you start sliding between them, you can't always find your way back. But you can travel between them. You do it. I don't travel between them. He opened my door, and for a moment, I saw not my front yard, but a vast, empty space filled with floating screens. Thousands of them, millions, all showing different versions of the same moment, the same lives, the same choices playing out in infinite variation. I exist in all of them. Before I could ask what that meant, he was gone. The van pulled away, that old big band music fading into the distance. I stood at my window, watching until it turned the corner. Then I looked at my TV, off, but somehow still threatening, like a door that might open at any moment. That was 3 months ago. I wish I could tell you I left it alone. That I never turned on the TV on a Thursday night. That I didn't lie awake wondering about those other channels, those other versions of my life. But loneliness does things to you. Makes you take risks you shouldn't take. It was last Thursday, 11:30 p.m. I'd had a few beers, okay, more than a few. The divorce papers had been finalized that day. 8 years of marriage, reduced to a signature on a line. I turned on the TV. Channel 7. Local news. Jennifer Hayes in her blue blazer. I stared at the screen, and I wished. God help me, I wished harder than I'd ever wished for anything. Show me the world where she stayed. The screen flickered. Different living room. Nicer. Cleaner. Photos on the wall. our wedding, a vacation to Colorado I didn't remember taking, her smile wider than I'd seen it in years. And then, footsteps from the kitchen. "Honey, you coming to bed?" Her voice, Sarah's voice, but not talking to me, talking to the other me, the one in that living room, in that world, in that life. I saw him walk past the screen, same face, but he looked happier, lighter, like he'd never carried the weight I carried. "Be right there," he said. She came into view. My Sarah, but not my Sarah. This one had longer hair, no stress lines around her eyes. She kissed him, the other me, and they walked off screen together. I sat there shaking, tears streaming down my face. This was it. This was the life I was supposed to have, the channel I was supposed to be on. I reached for the screen, and my hand went through. Not into it, through it, like it wasn't there, like it was just an opening. I could feel carpet on the other side. Different carpet, softer. I pushed my whole arm through. Then my shoulder. The static felt like electricity on my skin, but not painful. Almost inviting. I was halfway through when I saw it. On their coffee table. A photo I hadn't noticed before. A funeral program. My funeral program. In that world, I had died in a car accident 5 years ago. The me walking around, the me she kissed. He wasn't me at all. He was something else. Something that had slid into my place when I died. Something that was waiting for another opening, another channel to slide into. Something that saw me coming through and smiled with too many teeth. I yanked myself back so hard I fell off my couch. The TV sparked, smoked, and went dead. Not turned off, broken. Completely fried. I sat there gasping, my arm tingling with phantom static. The cable guy was right. Every channel is different, and not all of them are better. My phone rang. Unknown number. "You're lucky," the voice said. It was him, the Thursday cable guy. Most people don't pull back in time. "How did you—" "I told you. I exist in all of them. I saw you reaching through, saw what was waiting for you." A pause. "Your TV's broken now." "Can't be fixed. That's probably for the best." I almost— "Yes? You almost became something's Thursday night snack. The things that live between channels, they're always hungry. Always waiting for someone desperate enough to reach through. What are they? Does it matter? Just know this. Every Thursday they watch. Every TV is a window, and windows work both ways. You were broadcasting your pain, your desperation, and something answered. Something that would have worn your face, lived your life, and no one would have known the difference. Except you. Except me." His voice was tired. "I'll be by tomorrow to remove your cable box. Don't try to hook up another TV. The connection to your apartment is compromised now. You've been marked." Marked? Once you reach through, they never stop watching. Even without a TV, they know where you are. But as long as you don't give them another window. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. "Why do you do this?" I asked. "Why do you help people?" Silence. Then, "Because I reached through once. A long, long time ago. And what came back wasn't entirely me. Part of me is still there on another channel, living another life. And part of something else is here, fixing TVs, trying to stop others from making the same mistake. You're one of them? I'm both. Neither, it doesn't matter. What matters is you stay away from TVs on Thursdays. Any TV. Even ones in stores and bars and friends' houses, they'll all be windows now. And something will always be watching." He hung up. That was a week ago. Today's Thursday. I'm sitting in my dark apartment, no TV, no screens, nothing but silence. But I can hear them. in the walls, in the static of the air, in the spaces between heartbeats. They're waiting. Sometimes I catch glimpses and reflections, in windows, in mirrors, in puddles on the street, other versions of me living other lives. Some better, some worse, all of them wrong. The divorce was finalized. Sarah's gone. My old life is over. But I'm still here, still on my original channel, for better or worse. And if you're listening to this, if your TV has started showing things that aren't quite right, if the news seems wrong or the game seems off, don't wish for something different. Don't reach through. Because the Thursday cable guy can only fix so much. And once you've seen the other channels, you can never really unsee them. They're always there, just a flicker away. And on Thursday nights when the boundaries get thin, they're watching you watch them. The cable guy only comes on Thursdays. But sometimes that's already too late. Wait, do you hear that? That music, big band, like from an old van. But it's Friday. It's definitely Friday, isn't it? I need to check my phone. I need to... Oh God, the calendar on my wall. It says Thursday, but my phone says Friday. And the clock on my microwave says Wednesday. Which channel am I on? Which channel am I on? If you're hearing this, check your day. Check it right now. Because if they don't match, then you might be sliding too. And the Thursday cable guy? He can't fix what's already broken. He can only... Wait, there's someone at my door. But I didn't call anyone. I don't even have a TV anymore. The knocking. It's coming from inside the wall, from the other side. I think I've been on the wrong channel this whole time, and something's coming to switch me back. End. Did you check your calendar? Are all your days the same? And that person next to you, are you sure they're from your channel? Look closer at their eyes. Count their teeth when they smile. Because once you start sliding between realities, you never know which Thursday you'll wake up in, or whose life you're really living. Share this story. Let others know about the Thursday cable guy, because he's out there, fixing TV sets that show the wrong reality. And if your screen starts flickering, if you see another version of your life, don't reach through. Never reach through. The things waiting on the other channels are always hungry, and they've been watching you since you started listening to this. Story number 3. The brass bell clanged 3 times in the storm, but there was no streetcar on St. Charles Avenue that night. At least, there shouldn't have been. The city had shut down all public transit 12 hours ago when Hurricane Celeste started bearing down on New Orleans. But I heard it, clear as day through the howling wind and sheets of rain battering my apartment windows. That distinctive clang, clang, clang that had been part of this city's heartbeat for over a century. You probably think I'm crazy. Hell, I thought I was crazy too. Until I saw the lights, green and gold, floating down the flooded street like some ghost ship sailing through the darkness. And that's when I remembered what my grandmother used to tell me about the streetcar that only runs when the storms come. If you're still listening, good, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about this city. And if you live anywhere near the Gulf Coast, you need to hear this. The story begins now. My name is Marcus Thibodeau, born and raised in the Bywater district of New Orleans. I'd lived through Katrina as a kid, Isaac, Ida, you name the storm, and I'd probably ridden it out in some cramped apartment or another. But Hurricane Celeste was different from the moment the first weather reports started coming in. The meteorologists on Channel 4 kept using words like unprecedented and historic. Old-timers at the coffee shop on Dauphine Street were saying things that made my skin crawl. "This one's got teeth," Mr. Hebert said, stirring his chicory coffee with a shaking hand. "Reminds me of the storm of '57, the one that brought things up from the Gulf." I should have listened more carefully to what Mr. Hebert wasn't saying. The way his eyes darted toward the window when he mentioned '57. how he'd lowered his voice to barely a whisper when he said things. But I was young, stubborn, convinced that I could weather any storm this city could throw at me. The signs were there all week, if I'd known how to read them. Cats disappearing from the French Quarter, birds flying inland 3 days earlier than usual. The old Creole woman who sold pralines on Royal Street packing up her cart and muttering prayers in French. Les morts se réveillent, she'd said when I passed by. The dead are waking up. I should have evacuated. Everyone with sense had already left, but I'd just started a new job at the Preservation Society, cataloging old streetcar memorabilia, and I couldn't afford to lose it. Plus, my apartment was on the 3rd floor. I'd stocked up on water, batteries, canned goods. I'd be fine. The work at the Preservation Society had been strange, too. All week, I'd been finding documents that shouldn't have existed. Passenger manifests from the 1950s with names that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. Maintenance logs that mentioned repairs to Car 907, dated 3 years after it had supposedly been destroyed. And photographs. Old black and white shots of streetcars running through floods, with passengers whose faces were always just slightly out of focus. Mrs. Laveau, the head archivist, had warned me about getting too deep into the storm records. Some histories, she'd said, adjusting her glasses and peering at me over a stack of yellowed papers, are better left sleeping, especially the ones about what rides the rails when the water rises. The wind started picking up around 3 in the afternoon. By 6, the power was out. I sat in my living room, watching the oak trees on St. Claude bend like rubber, listening to debris slam against the building. That's when I heard it the first time. Clang, clang, clang. The sound seemed to cut through the storm noise like it was amplified, like it was meant for my ears alone. I pressed my face against the window, squinting through the rain. Nothing. Just darkness and the occasional flash of a transformer blowing in the distance. But that sound, it was so familiar, so impossibly clear despite the chaos outside. My phone still had some battery, so I checked the transit app. All streetcar lines had been suspended since noon. The depot was locked down. Every single car was supposed to be secured in the barn on Canal Street. But something nagged at me. A memory from the archives. Car 907 had never made it to the Canal Street barn. It had been lost. Somewhere else. Clang, clang, clang. There it was again. Closer this time. And beneath it, barely audible, the screech of metal wheels on wet tracks. But that was impossible. The old tracks had been paved over decades ago in most places. The modern streetcars ran on new rails, a different gauge entirely. What I was hearing was the sound of the original system, the one from before the floods, before the changes, before the city learned that some routes were too dangerous to keep running. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the window facing St. Charles. The street was a river, easily 3 feet of water rushing past. A stop sign had been ripped from its post and was spinning in the current like a demented pinwheel. And then, through the sheets of rain, I saw it. The streetcar was ancient. Not one of the refurbished tourist ones they run nowadays, but something older. The paint was that deep green they used in the 30s, with gold trim that somehow caught light that didn't exist. The windows glowed with a warm, amber light, like old gas lamps, and it was moving against the current, gliding through the floodwater as if it was on invisible tracks. But it was more than just the sight of it that made my blood freeze. It was the smell that somehow reached me through the sealed windows, through the storm, through 3 floors of brick and mortar. The smell of lake water, stagnant, ancient, heavy with the weight of things that had been underwater too long. I rubbed my eyes, looked again. It was still there, getting closer. And that's when I noticed the number on the front. Car 907. My blood went cold. See, I'd been cataloging streetcar records all week. Car 907 was destroyed in 1957, during Hurricane Audrey. The entire car had been swept into Lake Pontchartrain, along with its conductor and 7 passengers who'd tried to use it as shelter. They never found the bodies. The official report listed them as presumed drowned, but the unofficial stories, the ones whispered in the coffee shops and corner bars, those told a different tale. They said the car had been seen since during bad storms, running routes that no longer existed, picking up passengers who'd been dead for years. The streetcar was directly in front of my building now. It stopped, despite there being no platform, no actual tracks, nothing but roiling floodwater. The bell rang 3 times. The doors folded open with a pneumatic hiss that I could somehow hear over the storm. A figure stood in the doorway. It wore a conductor's uniform, but the fabric looked wet, always wet, like it had been soaked for decades. The face was hidden in shadow, but I could see the cap, the brass buttons, the ticket punch hanging from a chain. When the figure moved, water dripped from its clothes, but the water fell upward, defying gravity, disappearing into the storm-dark sky above. The conductor raised one hand and beckoned, and in that gesture, I saw something that nearly broke my mind. The hand was translucent. I could see the streetcar's interior lights shining through the flesh, through bone that looked waterlogged and soft. I stepped back from the window, my heart hammering. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. Storm hallucinations like that had to be it. Stress and isolation playing tricks on my mind. But even as I told myself this, I could feel something else. A pulling sensation, like a fishing line hooked behind my ribs, drawing me toward the window, toward the street, toward the impossible streetcar floating in the flood. But then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. Last chance, Marcus. The number wasn't local. Wasn't even a complete number. Just 7 digits. 907BELL, which should have been impossible. Phone numbers needed 10 digits. But there it was on my screen, glowing in the darkness of my apartment. I looked back at the streetcar. The conductor was still there, still waiting. And behind it, I could see passengers in the amber light. They sat perfectly still, faces forward, like mannequins in a museum display. But occasionally, one would turn its head toward my window. And when they did, I saw that their eyes reflected light like a cat's. But the light they reflected was the green gold of deep water, of lake depths where the sun never reaches. The smart thing would have been to stay in my apartment, to close the curtains, maybe take some melatonin, and sleep through the worst of the storm. But something in my grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. When the storm car comes, you don't ignore it. You can refuse it, but you never ignore it. She'd told me that story when I was 8, during Hurricane George. We'd huddled in her shotgun house in the Treme, playing cards by candlelight while the wind howled outside. There are things that ride the storms, she'd said, dealing another hand of bourrée. Old things. Hungry things. They come up from the water when it gets high enough, when the boundaries get thin. Most folks never see them, but some do. And when you see them, you have a choice to make. I grabbed my raincoat, stuffed my phone and flashlight in the pockets, and headed for the stairs. As I descended toward the street, toward whatever waited for me in car 907, I could hear my grandmother's voice one more time, fainter now, like an echo from the bottom of a well. Choose carefully, Cher. Some rides don't have return tickets. The water in the street was cold, colder than it should have been in September. It pushed against my legs as I waded toward the streetcar, trying to knock me over, pull me downstream. But the moment I got within 10 feet of car 907, the current seemed to part around it, creating a pocket of calm in the chaos. Up close, The streetcar was even more impossible. The wood gleamed with fresh varnish, but underneath I could smell something else. Lake water. Mud. That particular rot that comes from things that have been underwater too long. The conductor stepped aside as I climbed aboard. "Exact change only," he said, and his voice sounded like it was coming through water, bubbling and distorted. I fumbled in my pocket and found 2 quarters and a dime. 60 cents, the price of a ride in 1957. The coins were ice cold as I dropped them in the fare box. They made no sound when they hit the bottom. "Take any seat," the conductor said. "We've got a few more stops to make." I moved down the aisle, trying not to look too closely at the other passengers. There were maybe a dozen of them, all dressed in clothing from different eras. A woman in a 1920s flapper dress, a man in a Union Army uniform, a teenager in a Letterman jacket from the 80s. None of them moved. None of them breathed that I could see. I sat near the back, on one of those hard wooden benches. The moment I did, the streetcar lurched into motion. Outside, the storm raged, but inside it was quiet except for the clack, clack, clack of wheels on tracks that didn't exist. We glided down St. Charles, then turned onto Canal. The familiar streets were transformed into rushing rivers, but the streetcar moved through them like they were nothing. Buildings I'd known my whole life looked different in the amber light, older, like I was seeing them as they used to be. "First stop, Treme," the conductor called out. The streetcar stopped in front of a house I recognized, Mrs. Arsenault's place, or what was left of it. The roof had partially collapsed, and water was pouring through the windows. But standing on what used to be the porch was Mrs. Arsenault herself, wearing the same house dress she'd worn to church every Sunday until she died 3 years ago. She climbed aboard, paid her fare with coins that looked green with age, and sat down without a word. She didn't look at me, but I caught a glimpse of her face. Her eyes were the color of floodwater. Next stop, Marigny. More passengers got on, people I recognized but shouldn't have. Mr. Guidry from the hardware store, who'd had a heart attack during Hurricane Isaac. The Melanchthon twins who'd drowned in their attic during Katrina. Each one paid their 60 cents. Each one sat down in silence. The streetcar was filling up now. The amber light seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat, or like breathing. And I noticed something else. My reflection in the window was starting to fade. Not all at once, but like I was becoming transparent, layer by layer. "You're wondering why you can see them," a voice said beside me. I turned. A young woman had sat down next to me while I wasn't looking. Unlike the others, she seemed more solid, more real. She wore a sundress from the 60s, and her hair was done up in a beehive, but her eyes were alive, aware. "I'm Claudette," she said. "Claudette Rousseau. I was like you once, alive when I got on. That was during Hurricane Betsy, 1965. My throat was dry. What is this?" "The storm car," she said, matter of fact. "It runs the old routes during hurricanes, picking up the souls the water claims, or those about to be claimed. But I'm not dead." She gave me a sad smile. "Not yet." "But the storm knows things, sees things. That's why you got the invitation." Invitation. The bell. The text. "You could have stayed in your apartment, would have been safe there, probably. But you came anyway, they always do, the ones who are meant to ride." The streetcar lurched to another stop. "French Quarter," the conductor announced. A crowd was waiting this time, 20, maybe 30 people, all in various states of decay. Some looked fresh, like they'd just drowned. Others were nothing but suggestions of people, outlines filled with muddy water. They filed on in silence, and somehow there was room for all of them. "Where does it go?" I asked Claudette. "The streetcar, where does it end up?" Same place it always goes, she said, the lake. Car 907 returns to where it died, and everyone riding goes with it. Under the water, into the dark, until the next storm brings it back up. My hands were shaking now. There has to be a way off. There is. One stop, the old Carrollton terminus. It's the only place where the living can disembark. But what? She pointed toward the front of the car. You have to get past them, and they don't like letting the living go. The other passengers had started to notice me. I could feel their eyes, or what was left of them, turning in my direction. The woman in the flapper dress twisted her head completely around, owl-like, to stare. The Union soldier's jaw unhinged, revealing nothing but dark water inside. "Don't look at them directly," Claudette whispered. "And whatever you do, don't let them touch you. Their cold spreads, makes you like them." The streetcar picked up speed. Outside, the storm had intensified. Debris flew past the windows. Cars, pieces of roofs, things that might have been bodies. But inside, that amber light just pulsed, steady as a heartbeat. "Jackson Avenue," the conductor called. More passengers. These ones were worse. Some were missing pieces, arms, legs, heads. But they moved as if they were whole, settling into seats that seemed to expand to accommodate them. The streetcar was impossibly full now, but somehow there was always room for more. An old man in a shrimper's outfit sat down across from me. Water poured constantly from his mouth, nose, eyes, but he smiled anyway. "You're warm," he said, and his voice was the sound of drowning. "So warm. Can I touch?" He reached out one bloated hand. "No," Claudette said sharply. She pulled me to my feet. "We need to move toward the front. Carrollton is only 3 more stops." We pushed through the aisle. The dead parted reluctantly, and I could feel the cold radiating from them. My breath came out in clouds. Frost formed on my raincoat. One of them, a child who couldn't have been more than 10 when she died, grabbed my sleeve. Instantly, my arm went numb. The numbness spread up toward my shoulder, and I could feel myself getting heavier. Waterlogged. Claudette yanked me free, but I could see my hand starting to turn translucent. "It's starting," she said. "You don't have much time." We made it halfway up the car before the streetcar stopped again. Napoleon Avenue. This time, only one passenger got on. But the moment I saw him, I knew he was different. He wore a conductor's uniform, but not from the 50s. This one was older. From the very first streetcar lines in the 1890s, his face was completely obscured by shadow, but I could feel him looking at me. "Living blood," he said, and his voice was like grinding metal. "It's been so long since we had living blood." He started down the aisle toward us. The other dead moved aside for him, pressing themselves against the windows. Even Claudette shrank back. "That's the first conductor," she whispered. "Benjamin Cross. He drove his streetcar straight into the river during the hurricane of 1893, trying to save a full load of passengers. They all drowned. He's been collecting souls ever since, trying to make up for the ones he lost." Cross stopped right in front of me. This close, I could see under his cap. Where his face should have been was just depth, like looking into a well that went down forever. "You can join us willingly," he said. "It's peaceful under the water. No more storms, no more fear, just the quiet, and the dark, and the cold." "He's not yours yet," Claudette said, stepping between us. "He has until Carrollton." Cross laughed. A sound like water going down a drain. "Carrollton, yes. But will he make it? The car is so full now, so many souls between here and there, and they're all so cold, so hungry for warmth." He moved past us, taking a position at the very front of the streetcar next to our conductor. They stood together like twin sentinels, watching, waiting. Louisiana Avenue. The doors opened, but no one got on. Instead, water started pouring in, not floodwater, but lake water. Dark, murky, smelling of fish and decay. It pooled around our feet, rose to our ankles. "It's starting," Claudette said. "The car is beginning its descent." We're running out of time. The dead were getting restless now. They stood up from their seats, swaying with the motion of the streetcar, and began closing in around us. Their hands reached out, grasping. Desperate for warmth they'd never feel again. I pushed through them, feeling the cold bite deeper with each contact. My legs were going numb. My vision was starting to blur, but I could see the front door, could see the street beyond. Only 2 more stops. "Carrollton Avenue," the conductor announced. This was it. I lunged for the door, but the dead surged forward, blocking my path. They pressed in from all sides, their cold hands grabbing my arms, my shoulders, my face. I could feel myself sinking, drowning in their collective chill. "No!" Claudette shouted. She did something I didn't expect. She started to glow, not with amber light, but with something warmer, sunlight. The kind of golden afternoon light that only exists in memory. "I remember," she said, and her voice was different. Younger, alive. "I remember being warm. I remember the sun on my face. I remember living." The dead recoiled from her light. Even Cross stepped back. In that moment of reprieve, I saw my chance. The doors were open. The storm was right there, waiting. But as I moved toward freedom, I heard something that stopped me cold. My grandmother's voice, calling from the back of the streetcar. "Marcus, baby, don't leave me here alone." I turned, and there she was, Grandma Thibodeau, wearing the same blue dress we'd buried her in 5 years ago. She looked exactly as I remembered. Silver hair pinned back, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, that smile that could make any hurt better. "Come sit with me, Cher," she said, patting the seat beside her. "The storm's too bad out there. You'll catch your death." Every instinct screamed at me to run to her. This was the woman who'd raised me after my parents died, who'd taught me to make gumbo, to respect the old ways, to never turn your back on family. But Claudette grabbed my arm. "It's not her," she hissed. "The streetcar. It knows things, pulls memories, makes you see what will keep you here, but God, she looked so real, so alone." "Marcus," my grandmother said again, and now there were tears in her eyes. "I've been riding this car for 5 years, waiting for family, waiting for you. Don't you want to be with me again?" The water was rising faster now, up to our knees. The streetcar was tilting forward, beginning its dive toward the lake. Through the front windows, I could see we were approaching the Carrollton terminus, but beyond that, the tracks continued straight into Lake Pontchartrain. The water was black, endless, waiting. 30 seconds until departure, Cross announced. Last chance to disembark. The dead pressed closer, but they weren't grabbing anymore. They were watching, waiting to see what I'd choose, because that was the real trap, wasn't it? The streetcar didn't take you by force. It made you want to stay. "Marcus," my grandmother said, standing now, moving toward me through the crowd of souls. "Your parents are here too. They've been waiting. We can be a family again, under the water, where the storms can't reach, where nothing hurts anymore." And then I saw them. Mom and Dad, standing behind her. They looked exactly as they had the day before the car accident. Young, whole, smiling. "Hey, sport," my dad said, using the nickname only he had ever called me. "We've missed you so much." The water was at my waist now. The cold had spread through most of my body. I could feel myself becoming like them, transparent, fading. It would be so easy to just let go, to sink, to join them. But then I remembered something else my grandmother had told me. The real one, not this echo made of memory and lake water. She'd said it the night before she died, holding my hand in the hospital. When my time comes, don't you follow me, Cher. You stay in the light. You stay warm. You live for all of us. You're not my grandmother, I said to the thing wearing her face. My grandmother would never want me to die. She'd fight heaven and hell to keep me breathing. The thing's expression flickered, like bad reception on an old TV. For just a second, I saw what was underneath. Not my grandmother, but something ancient, hollow, hungry. Something that had been feeding on grief and loneliness for over a century. Now, Claudette shouted. She blazed even brighter, and in that light, I saw the truth. All the passengers, they weren't souls being collected. They were prisoners, caught in an endless loop, riding the storm car again and again, feeding whatever dark thing powered it. I dove for the door just as the streetcar tilted into its final plunge. The water rushed up, cold, crushing. But I kicked hard, pushed through the doorway, and suddenly I was in the storm again. Real rain, real wind, real cold, but the kind that belonged to the living world. I hit the flooded street hard, went under, came up gasping. The streetcar was sinking in front of me. Those amber lights descending into water that couldn't possibly be this deep. Not here, not on Carrollton Avenue. But it went down anyway, down and down, until even the lights disappeared. Claudette was standing beside me in the flood, but she was fading too, becoming transparent. You did it, she said, smiling. You broke the pattern. Maybe that means something. Maybe next storm, fewer people will hear the bell. What about you? I asked. I made my choice in 1965, she said, but you helped me remember what it felt like to fight. To hope. That's not nothing. She dissolved into the rain, into light, into something warmer than the cold that had trapped her for 60 years. I stood there in the flood, in the hurricane. More alone than I'd ever been, but more alive too. The storm raged for 6 more hours. I found shelter in an abandoned convenience store. Rode out the worst of it eating stale chips and warm beer, thinking about the streetcar, about the choice, about my grandmother's real last words. When morning came, the water receded. The sun broke through the clouds, and New Orleans, broken but unbeaten, began to wake up again. They found car 907 3 days later. Not in the lake, but in the maintenance yard where it had been scrapped in 1958. Just pieces of rusted metal and rotted wood. The official report said storm debris, but I knew better. I went back to work at the Preservation Society, kept cataloging, kept researching, and I found things. Reports going back decades, centuries even. Stories about the storm car, about people who'd heard the bell, seen the lights, made the choice. Most chose to ride, but a few, just a few, chose the storm instead, chose the difficult, dangerous, painful path of staying alive. And every time someone made that choice, the streetcar got a little weaker. Its pull a little less strong. Hurricane season isn't over. There will be more storms, and when they come, car 907 will rise from whatever dark depth holds it. The bell will ring, the amber lights will glow, and someone, somewhere, will have to choose. So if you're listening to this from anywhere along the Gulf, remember what I'm telling you. When the storms come, when you hear that bell, when you see those lights, remember that the dead don't need company. They need someone to remember them as they were, warm, alive, loved. Remember that the greatest honor you can give the lost is to keep living. And if you see a streetcar running through a hurricane, no matter how safe it looks, no matter who you think you see inside, don't get on. Trust me, the storm is survivable. The alternative isn't. Although, last week, I got another text, unknown number. Just 2 words this time, next time. So maybe my ride isn't over. Maybe you never really get off the storm car, not completely. Maybe it's always there, waiting in the next hurricane, patient as water, inevitable as death. But that's a story for another storm. Sweet dreams, if you can manage them. And remember, when the wind picks up, when the rain starts to fall, when you hear that distinctive clang, clang, clang in the distance, sometimes the scariest choice is to keep living. Sometimes that's also the only choice that matters. Story number 4. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. when my Corolla died on Route 539, right in the heart of the Pine Barrens. I know what you're thinking. Another stranded motorist story. But here's the thing. Locals in South Jersey, they have rules about these woods. Rules my grandmother whispered to me when I was 8 years old, sitting on her porch in Hamilton, watching the tree line as dusk fell. Rules. I forgot, until that night reminded me why we never, ever stop in the Barrens after dark. Before I tell you what happened, you need to understand something. I'm not the type who believes in things. I'm Sarah Chen, 32, systems analyst for a tech firm in Cherry Hill. I deal in data, logic, ones and zeros. But what I experienced that November night, it changed everything I thought I knew about the 1,000,000 acres of pine forest that sprawl across New Jersey like a dark secret nobody wants to talk about. So here's my question for you, and I need you to really think about this before you answer. When was the last time you were truly alone? I mean, completely, utterly alone, with no cell signal, no lights except stars filtered through pine branches, and the absolute certainty that something was watching you from between those trees. Comment below if you've ever felt that kind of isolation, because I need to know I'm not the only one who's been marked by the Barrens. And now, the story begins. The engine coughed twice before dying completely. Just stopped. No warning lights, no strange noises beforehand. One moment I was driving back from Atlantic City after visiting my college roommate Emma. Next moment I was coasting to a stop on the shoulder of a road so dark it seemed to swallow my headlights whole. Come on, come on. I turned the key, nothing. Not even that clicking sound a dead battery makes. The silence hit me first. You don't realize how much noise your car makes until it stops. The hum of the engine, the whisper of the air conditioning, even the faint buzz of electronics. All gone. Just me and my breathing, which suddenly seemed too loud. I pulled out my phone. No signal, of course. The Pine Barrens are famous for dead zones, over 1,000,000 acres where cell towers fear to tread. My phone's screen cast a pale blue glow across my face, making my reflection in the windshield look ghostly. That's when I remembered my grandmother's first rule. If your car dies in the Barrens, don't get out. Not at night, never at night. But what choice did I have? I couldn't just sit here until morning. Someone would come along eventually, right? Route 539 connects Tuckerton to Warren Grove. People use it. Not many at midnight on a Tuesday in November, but someone would come. 20 minutes passed, not a single car. The woods pressed in on both sides of the road, a wall of pitch pines and scrub oak so thick you couldn't see more than a few feet in. The locals call it the Pinelands, but everyone else knows it as the Pine Barrens. Barren of people, barren of help, barren of hope if you get lost in there. Something moved in my peripheral vision. Just a flash of something passing between the trees on my right. Probably a deer. Jersey has tons of deer. Although, do deer move that quietly? I couldn't hear anything, no crackling of undergrowth, no snapping twigs, just movement, like a shadow sliding through shadows. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. The Jersey Devil ain't the only thing in those woods, Sarah. There's older things, hungrier things. I used to laugh when she said stuff like that. Used to. 40 minutes now. My phone battery was at 60%. I'd turned off everything except the flashlight function, which I flicked on occasionally to check the darkness beyond my windows. Each time I did, the light seemed to get swallowed up faster, like the darkness was getting thicker, more solid. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps on the asphalt, coming from behind my car. Relief flooded through me. Finally, someone to help. I grabbed my phone, ready to use the flashlight to signal them, when my grandmother's second rule suddenly blazed through my mind. If someone approaches your car in the Barrens at night, don't look at them directly, and whatever you do, don't open the door. The footsteps got closer. Measured, patient. Not the quick stride of someone approaching a stranded motorist to offer help. These were the steps of someone, or something, that had all the time in the world. They stopped right beside my driver's side door. I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. In the side mirror, just at the edge of my vision, I could see a shape. Tall, way too tall. Nobody's that tall. 3 knocks on my window. Slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. You need help, miss? The voice was wrong. It was trying to sound normal, friendly even, but there was something underneath it. Like 2 voices speaking at once, one human, one not. It reminded me of those AI voices that almost sound real, but there's something in the uncanny valley about them that makes your skin crawl. I didn't answer, didn't move, barely breathed. I can see you in there. The voice got closer to the glass. Your car broke down. Happens all the time out here. The Barrens, they don't like machines. Too new, too foreign. Still, I didn't move. My grandmother's voice screamed in my head. Don't engage. Don't look. Don't open the door. The temperature's dropping tonight. Gonna hit 30 degrees. You'll freeze in there. My truck's just up the road. I can give you a ride to Chatsworth. There's a gas station there. They got a phone. It was tempting. God, it was so tempting. But something about the way it said truck and gas station and phone. Like it was reciting words it had heard but didn't quite understand what they meant. The shape in my peripheral vision moved, and I caught a glimpse of what might have been fingers pressed against my window. Too many fingers, too long. Or, the voice dropped lower, losing its fake friendliness. You could stay here. But Sarah, things hunt in these woods at night. Old things, hungry things. My blood turned to ice. I hadn't told it my name. The thing outside my car laughed. Not a human laugh, more like it was imitating what it thought laughter should sound like. Sarah Chen, 32, systems analyst. Visiting Emma in Atlantic City. Your grandmother, Rosa, she knew about us. Taught you the rules. But you forgot, didn't you? City living makes people forget the old ways. My phone, face down on the passenger seat, suddenly lit up. No incoming call, no notification, just the screen blazing to life. In the reflection on the windshield, I could see the thing outside more clearly. I wish I hadn't. It wore the shape of a man, but all wrong, like someone had tried to draw a person from memory but kept getting the proportions off. The arms too long, the shoulders too narrow, the head was the worst part. It kept shifting, like it couldn't decide what face to wear. Rosa was smart, it continued. She knew the rules. Passed them down. But each generation forgets a little more. Your mother forgot them completely, didn't she? That's why she never came back that summer when you were 12. My mother had disappeared during a camping trip in the Pine Barrens when I was 12. They found her car, but never found her. The police said she probably got lost, wandered into the woods. But grandmother knew better. She'd grabbed my shoulders that day, looked me dead in the eyes, and made me promise to remember the rules. 3 rules. Just 3 simple rules. 1. Don't get out of your car at night. 2. Don't look at them. Don't talk to them. Don't open the door. 3. If you break the first 2 rules, what was the 3rd rule? Why couldn't I remember the 3rd rule? The thing outside started walking around my car, slow, deliberate. I could hear its footsteps, too many footsteps, like it had more than 2 feet. The Lenape knew about us, it said, its voice coming now from the passenger side. They called us the Matantu, the evil spirits. They knew to avoid these woods at night. Then your people came, built your roads, brought your cars. You forgot that some places aren't meant for you. My phone screen went dark, then lit up again. This time, there was a text message. From a number I didn't recognize. Just 3 words. Look at me. I squeezed my eyes shut. Another text. Your grandmother is here with us. She wants to say hello. That almost got me, almost made me turn. But then I remembered something else grandmother said. They lie. Whatever they tell you, however they try to trick you, they lie. The thing laughed again, that horrible imitation of human joy. Smart girl. Rosa trained you well. But you're forgetting something important, your gas tank. My eyes flicked to the gauge, 3/4 full when I started. Now, nearly empty. How? The engine hadn't been running. We drink it, the thing said, like it was reading my mind. The essence of your machines. Your technology, we've adapted, you see. Evolution doesn't stop just because humans think they own the world. We used to feed on horse sweat and wagon grease. Now, gasoline and battery acid. The gauge dropped another notch as I watched. By morning, you'll be empty. And when the sun rises, if it rises, you'll have to get out, have to walk, and then... It didn't finish. It didn't need to. Something else moved in the woods. Multiple somethings. In my mirrors, I could see shapes between the trees. Dozens of them, all watching, all waiting. You want to know something funny? The thing asked. Your kind built a road right through our territory. Right through the heart of it. Every night we wait. Most nights, nobody stops. But sometimes we get lucky. My phone buzzed. Another text. Emma's wondering why you haven't texted her that you got home safe. How did it know about Emma? We know everything about you, Sarah. Every email you've sent, every photo on your phone, every secret you think is safely stored in the cloud. The Pine Barrens aren't just trees and sand. They're connected to everything now. We've evolved. The shapes in the woods were getting closer. I could see them more clearly now. Things that walked upright but moved wrong, like broken puppets jerking on invisible strings. That's when I remembered the 3rd rule. My grandmother's voice, clear as day. If you break the first 2 rules, if they surround you, there's only one thing that can save you. The old contract. The words that bind them to the Barrens. But what were the words? Think, Sarah, think. The gas gauge hit empty. My car's electronics started failing. Dashboard lights flickering. Radio crackling to life with static that almost sounded like voices. Whispers in languages I didn't recognize. Or maybe I did. Somewhere deep in my ancestral memory. Time's running out, Sarah. The thing was back at my driver's side window. Soon you'll have no choice. The cold will drive you out. Or the fear, or the curiosity. Humans are so curious. It's what brought you to these woods in the first place, isn't it? taking the scenic route instead of the parkway. It was right. I had chosen this route. Emma had warned me to stick to the Garden State Parkway, but I wanted to see the Barrens at night. Some part of me had been drawn here. That's how it works, the thing said. We call, and eventually someone answers. Your mother answered. Your grandmother's sister answered. Going back generations, your family has been answering our call. My phone lit up again. This time, it was playing a video. Security footage from a gas station. I recognized the timestamp. 3 hours ago. Me, filling up my tank in Atlantic City, but in the reflection on my car's window, standing right behind me, one of them. It had been following me the whole time. We marked you years ago, Sarah. The night you first drove through here alone, remember? Your 21st birthday. Driving back from that party in Long Beach Island. I did remember. My car had acted strange that night too, but I'd managed to make it through. I'd thought it was just bad gas or something. We let you go that time. Wanted you to grow, to ripen, to build a life worth taking. The shapes in the woods were pressed against the tree line now. Dozens of them, all different sizes, different wrong shapes, but all watching with eyes that reflected my phone's light like a cat's. Then, in the static of my radio, I heard it. My grandmother's voice, faint but unmistakable. Sarah, the contract. Remember the contract? The thing outside hissed. That's not possible. She's ours. She can't. But grandmother's voice grew stronger. The Pact of 1693, the agreement with the Lenape, say the words. Suddenly, I knew. The words came to me not in English but in Lenape, a language I'd never learned but somehow knew. Nkita Kami, Nkitaptonen, Nkitalogalgan. The thing outside shrieked, a sound that made my windows vibrate. The shapes in the woods pulled back. I continued, the words flowing from some ancestral memory. By the treaty of the old ones, by the agreement of the first people, I claim safe passage through the shadow pines. No! The thing pounded on my window. That contract is void. Your people broke it, built your cities, poisoned the water, burned the forests. But I kept speaking, words I didn't know I knew. The contract stands until the last pine falls, until the last grain of sand blows away. I am blood of blood, descendant of those who signed. I claim my right of passage. The pounding stopped. Silence fell over the barrens, but not a peaceful silence. A tense, angry silence. Fine, the thing finally said, its voice now completely inhuman, all pretense dropped. The contract grants you safe passage, but only you, only this once, and only until dawn. My car's engine suddenly roared to life. The dashboard lit up normal, gas gauge showing 3/4 full again. Drive, Sarah Chen. Drive and don't stop. Don't look back. And know this, the contract protects fewer and fewer of you each year. Your children won't know the words. Your children's children won't even know there was a contract. And then. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I threw the car in drive and floored it. I drove through the darkness, hands shaking, eyes fixed on the road ahead. In my mirrors, I could see them following. Not running, just walking, but somehow keeping pace with my car. The speedometer said 60, but it felt like I was crawling. The road seemed to stretch forever. Route 539 is only about 15 miles through the deepest part of the Barrens. But that night it felt like hundreds. The trees pressed in closer, branches scraping my car like fingernails. The yellow center line wavered, sometimes disappearing entirely, leaving me driving through a tunnel of pine and shadow. My phone rang. Emma's number. I knew better than to answer. It wasn't Emma. It rang again. This time my mother's old number, the one that had been disconnected for 20 years. Then my grandmother's. then numbers I didn't recognize, but somehow knew were from people who disappeared in these woods over the decades. All calling, all wanting me to answer, all trying to trick me into stopping. The radio crackled. "Sarah, pull over. We need to tell you something important about the contract." I turned it off. My phone screen lit up with texts. "You're going the wrong way. Turn around. The bridge is out ahead. Your grandmother wants you to know she loves you. Stop and we'll let you go. You can't leave the Barrens. You've always belonged to us." I threw the phone in the back seat. Something heavy landed on my roof. Footsteps above me, pacing from front to back, claws scraped against metal. Whatever it was laughed, that same horrible imitation of human joy. "The contract says safe passage," it called down, "but it doesn't say comfortable passage." More things landed on the car. My roof began to dent inward from the weight. The windshield cracked, but I kept driving. Then, up ahead, taillights. Another car, a real car with a real person. As I got closer, I could see it was a New Jersey State Trooper vehicle, parked on the shoulder. The officer was standing beside it, flashlight in hand, waving me down. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to get help, to tell someone what was happening. But my grandmother's voice echoed again. "Trust nothing in the Barrens at night, nothing." As I passed, doing 70 now, I glimpsed the officer's face in my headlights. It was changing, melting, becoming something else. The trooper uniform split open, revealing something dark and wet underneath. Not a trooper. Never a trooper. The things on my roof shrieked in frustration as I passed their trap. Miles crawled by, my gas gauge started dropping again, faster this time. The engine coughed. The speedometer fell to 50, then 40, then 30. "You won't make it," the thing on my roof sang. The contract expires at dawn, and dawn is still an hour away, 20 miles per hour now. The engine was dying again. That's when I saw it. A faint glow on the horizon. Not dawn. Too early for dawn. But the lights of Chatsworth. Actual electric lights from actual buildings with actual people. 15 miles per hour. The town grew closer. I could see the 24-hour Wawa station. Safety, normalcy. Life. 10 miles per hour. The things in the woods were running now, no longer pretending to be human. Shapes bounded between the trees. Some on 2 legs, some on 4, some on more. All converging on the point where the road left the deep barrens and entered the town, 5 miles per hour. The engine died completely. I was coasting now, rolling on momentum alone. The Wawa station was maybe 300 yards away. I could see someone inside, a bored cashier playing on their phone. The car rolled to a stop 50 yards from the parking lot. "Contracts fulfilled," the thing on my roof said. "We gave you safe passage." "Your car breaking down again. Well, that's just bad luck." I grabbed my phone, my purse, my hand on the door handle. 50 yards, I could run 50 yards. But the moment my foot touched the asphalt, they would have me. The contract only protected me in the car. Then I heard it. A sound I'll never forget. The sound of dozens of things breathing in unison, waiting, anticipating. The hunt about to begin. That's when headlights appeared behind me. Real headlights this time. A massive pickup truck with Jersey plates and a Rutgers sticker. It pulled up alongside me, and the driver, a middle-aged black woman in scrubs, rolled down her window. "You okay, honey?" she asked. "Car trouble?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were brown and tired and human, so wonderfully human. "Please," I whispered, "please help me." She must have seen something in my face because she immediately unlocked her doors. "Get in." Quick, I dove into her truck just as the first gray light of dawn touched the sky. Behind us, the woods exploded with sound. Shrieking, howling, rage that shook the trees. But they couldn't follow. Not into the light, not outside the deep barrens. The woman drove me to the Wawa, bought me coffee, waited with me until the tow truck came. She didn't ask why I was crying. Didn't ask about the deep scratches on my car's roof. Didn't ask why I kept looking back at the tree line. Just before she left for her shift at Virtua Hospital, she squeezed my hand and said, "My grandmother was from Chatsworth, born and raised. She taught me the rules about the barrens. You're lucky you remembered them." I wanted to tell her everything, but all I could manage was, "Thank you." She smiled. "Pass it on someday." The knowledge. Someone's going to need it. The barrens are getting hungrier, and people are forgetting the old ways. That was 3 months ago. I've moved since then. Live in North Jersey now, far from the Pine Barrens. But sometimes, late at night, my phone lights up with texts from numbers that shouldn't exist. Pictures of my old route. Videos of my car still somehow driving down Route 539, even though I sold it to a scrapyard. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear them calling my name on the wind. The contract protected me that night. But contracts can be renegotiated, and they have all the time in the world. So, if you're watching this from Jersey, especially South Jersey, remember the rules. Remember the old ways. And whatever you do, whatever emergency you have, whatever shortcut seems tempting, don't stop in the Pine Barrens at night. They're waiting. They're always waiting, and they're getting hungrier. Now, I need to know. Have you ever driven through the Pine Barrens at night? Have you felt that pull, that call to take the dark road through the pines? Comment below. Share this story with anyone who lives near or travels through South Jersey. Subscribe if you want to hear more about the things that hide in America's forgotten places. Because this isn't the only place with rules. And I'm starting to remember them all. Sweet dreams, if you can still have them after this. Epilogue. The research. 6 months have passed since that night, and I can't stop digging. Can't stop researching. What started as a traumatic experience has become an obsession, and what I've discovered makes that November night seem like a gentle warning. The Pine Barrens aren't unique. They're just the most active. I've found records dating back to the 1600s, buried in historical society archives and old church records. The Lenape didn't just avoid the deep forests at night. They performed ceremonies to keep the Matantu contained. Regular rituals, offerings, acknowledgments of the old boundaries. When European settlers arrived, they dismissed these practices as superstition. The first recorded disappearance was in 1697. A surveyor named Matthias Holstein vanished while mapping property lines for the West Jersey Society. His horse returned to camp without him, and the surveying equipment was found scattered along what is now Route 539, as if dropped in haste. No body was ever recovered. By 1720, the pattern was established. Every few years, someone would vanish in the deep barrens, always at night, always alone. The local Lenape, now forced to interact with settlers, tried to warn them about the rules, about the boundaries that shouldn't be crossed after dark. Some listened. Most didn't. Then came the iron foundries and glass factories. The Pine Barrens became industrialized, with workers living deep in the forest. The disappearances increased. Entire settlements like Batstow and Harrisville learned the rules the hard way, or didn't learn them at all. The abandoned ruins you see today aren't just victims of economic collapse. Some were abandoned for other reasons. Darker reasons. I found a journal entry from 1823 written by a foreman at the Martha Furnace. The Negroes and Indians refused to work past sunset, no matter the urgency of the order. They speak of old agreements, of things that hunt in the darkness between the pines. I thought it mere superstition until young Hawkins disappeared on the night shift. We found his tools scattered along the Batstow River, but no sign of struggle. The workers say he broke the compact I'm beginning to think they may be right. The compact, the contract. Different words, same meaning. But here's what truly terrifies me. The entities in the barrens have been evolving, adapting, learning. In the 1800s, they imitated travelers on foot, horse-drawn wagons. By the early 1900s, they were mimicking automobiles. I found a 1923 police report about a phantom Ford that would appear on the Batstow Road, leading lost motorists deeper into the forest. By the 1950s, they were impersonating state troopers. Now, they're digital. They know our online lives, our social media, our search histories. They've learned to manipulate our technology, to use our own devices against us. That video of my car still driving Route 539? It wasn't just a trick. Somehow, they've created a digital echo of that night, playing on loop in their electronic web. I've contacted other survivors, found them through forums, social media, support groups for unexplained experiences. There aren't many of us, but we exist. A trucker named Miguel, who encountered them near Chatsworth in 2019. A college student named Ashley who broke down on Route 206 in 2020. A retired teacher named Patricia, whose GPS led her into the deep barrens in 2021. We all share certain traits. We all had ancestors who lived in South Jersey. We all knew fragments of the old rules, passed down through family stories. And we all feel them sometimes, at the edge of our perception, testing the boundaries of our new lives. The entities are patient. They can wait decades between hunts, but they're also getting bolder. The old contract, the Lenape agreement that saved my life, is weakening. Each generation remembers less, speaks fewer of the old languages, observes fewer of the old boundaries. How long before the contract fails completely? I've started visiting the historical societies, the libraries, the tribal cultural centers, learning Lenape phrases, documenting the rules before they're lost forever. Creating a digital archive, ironically, using the same technology the entities have learned to manipulate. Because I understand now why that woman at the Wawa told me to pass it on, why my grandmother made me promise to remember. The knowledge isn't just protection. It's a responsibility, a debt to those who didn't make it out. The Pine Barrens span 1.1 million acres. They're home to 850,000 people during the day. At night, they belong to something else entirely. Something that remembers when the forests stretched unbroken from the Atlantic to the Delaware. Something that considers us temporary visitors in their domain. Something that's learning to adapt to our modern world faster than we're learning to defend against it. If you live in New Jersey, learn the rules. If you have family from South Jersey, ask them about the old stories. If you must drive through the deep barrens at night, remember, don't get out, don't look, don't open the door. And if your car breaks down, pray you remember the words. The contract is still valid. For now, but they're getting hungrier, and we're forgetting how to feed them anything except ourselves.